Well, I thought we were. Yeah.
But you also didn't know the president and John
Rules Committee will come to order, and thank you very much for joining us again today for another awesome Rules Committee meeting. The chair will be in receipt of a motion from the gentleman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina. Whoops, is it? Yeah, there we go.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant a rule providing for the consideration of the Senate amendment to H.R. 2146, the Defending Public Safety Employees Retirement Act. The rule makes an order of motion offered by the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means or his designee that the House concur in the Senate amendment with the amendment printed in the Rules Committee report. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the motion and provides that the motion is not subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule provides that the Senate amendment and the motion shall be considered as read. Finally, the rule provides 1 hour debate on the motion, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina. I'd like to elaborate. We're meeting today to consider a House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2146. This is a bill that had passed the House, that had gone to the Senate, that was agreed to by the Senate, but there was an amendment to that that changed a date. They are shipping that back to the House of Representatives as a result of action by the Senate. This process is to keep the underlying bill, as you know, TPA, with the Senate amendment intact. It adds to the text the TPA portion of the trade bill, which passed the House last Friday and previously passed in the Senate on a bipartisan basis. To be clear, the text of today's TPA amendment is identical to the TPA amendment which passed the House last week. If this amendment passes the House, the Senate will then have to pass it again. This measure does not address TAA. Our expectation is that the Senate will address that separately as they choose to do. I think this is a fair rule. I think we understand that this piece of legislation is about jobs in America, creating and crafting a future to where we engage the world for the betterment of jobs and the American people. Does anyone have anything they'd like to discuss or amendment there too? Gentlewoman from New York's recognized.
Well, if you're on this committee like Alice in Wonderland, you can believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. Are we voting for 2 bills here? We're going to vote for the firemen at the same time that they vote for TPA? Will that be 2 separate votes, or how do you plan to do that on the floor?
Thank you very much. This is the bill, H.R. 2146, that had previously passed the House, had gone to the Senate. The Senate passed it but amended it with a new date.
Right.
It is coming back over, and we would have to vote for or agree to, if we did, H.R. New date. We're adding to that a TPA, the exact TPA language that passed last week. We're putting it on one rule.
Self-executing, Pete?
No, ma'am. We're putting one rule together, and in essence, these 2 bills. You're going to have to vote on both of them.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Excuse me, just one vote.
There'll be 2
We're going to put them
votes.
together.
2.
One vote. So there will be the rule, and then the passage of this House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 2146 that will then add this.
You know, it really is a grand falloon here that all we've gone through on all of this, and House members have never had a chance to really try to amend it or do anything else to it. And now we're scissoring and pasting something else here again. But so this will be self-executed in the rule, your new date. Is that it?
I think we're agreeing to it by voting for this.
For the rule.
Separate. There will be
We're
a
gonna have
rule.
separate
There will
vote that
be a
we're gonna
rule.
accept a date change?
It is a date change that is the modified bill.
Where is the date? And what is it?
Thank you very much. If the gentlewoman will please hold for a minute, I will figure that one out. And in fairness, you're asking good questions.
I know it. I'm pretty fond of them.
You're entitled to this, and this is why I said ahead of time I wanted to give you enough time.
Absolutely. What's the date?
Okay. And so this is, after,
no date
it
on it.
appears to be December 23rd, 31st, 2015, is the Senate amendment that we'd be concurring to, we'd be agreeing to. So the answer is 12/31/2015.
And we will vote for that on the floor.
That's correct.
And then you will vote for TPA.
It's my understanding that you're going to vote for both with one vote. There will be the rule vote, and then there will be the vote on the amendment there too, which
Okay,
will
so
include
two
the
now, now
TPA.
one. Okay.
Well, it's not,
Oh,
it's
let's-
not two,
yeah, let's-
it's one, but it's a rule vote plus. So it depends how you count.
Okay,
Math counts.
well,
Further amendment or discussion?
well, I just object to the fact that we can't do any amendments here. We know after TPA passes, there'll never be an amendment, and if it passes,
If.
yes,
Well, everybody's got a chance.
everybody's got a chance, yep. You only won by 8, right?
Further discussion?
No further discussion from me,
Gentleman,
but something
Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I want to kind of reference something the ranking member was talking about in the fact that this is unamendable. And I understand that people have different positions on trade. I'm very skeptical of this trade agreement. I've seen some of the negative impacts of past trade agreements, and I think we ought to learn from some of our mistakes. I think there are members in this House, both Republicans and Democrats, who have some good ideas on how to improve this whole process and to protect jobs in this country. But we have not been we were not given that opportunity on the first TPA go around, and we're not being given it a chance on this go around. And I point that out because there's a contrast to the United States Senate. And I usually don't say nice things about Mitch McConnell, but at least in the Senate, they get to amend this whole thing. And I don't know why they should have that right and be able to, do what they want. And then we're told that you got to take it or leave it. I think there ought to be some parity here, some equity, if you will. And again, I mean, I think this whole process would be less controversial if you allowed members on both sides to have an opportunity to do some amendments. We weren't offered that in the first go-around. We're not being offered that opportunity in the second go-around, and it really is unfortunate. And I just think the record should reflect that. And I think, if senators can amend this, we ought to be able to amend it. And I yield back.
Would you yield to me, please? Because I want to ask, this is such a Byzantine thing that we're doing here. Do you think that this is done to get away from the blue slip issue? There must be some reason why we're taking firemen in the same breath here.
Yeah, well,
By December 31st, but I can't imagine doing a rule just to change the date.
well,
Do you find that strange?
Again, I do. I find the whole process strange, and I find it even stranger that we can't amend this, given the fact that this is
Yes.
going back to the Senate.
They can amend it
Yeah,
when they
right.
get it.
Under the previous process, you could argue that we had it go right to the president. This is going back to the Senate, so this process isn't over yet. And the only thing that really we know for sure is that members of the House are being locked out of any opportunity to be heard on this, and I
Well,
regret that.
Let me amend that a little bit to say that, once again, the Democrat members of the Rules Committee are being locked out from the
We are,
possibility
and
of
I would say-
doing anything on behalf of
but-
half of our members.
Right.
in
But
the
I would also say to my Republican friends who have some interesting ideas on trade, they're being locked out of this process as well, and that, I think that's unfair. Anyway, I yield back my time.
Mr.
Gentleman
Chairman.
yields back time. Gentleman, the floor is
Yes.
recognized.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the vote that we cast with reference to penalty-free withdrawal for law enforcement, firefighters and air traffic controllers, do you or can you give me an indication as to what the vote was. Was it a unanimous vote, or was it on suspension? I just don't have a memory of it. It would seem to me that I voted for this, and my question would follow after you tell me what the process was that it was voted on initially in the House.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. I think these are all very good questions, and I'm going to now go to Thomas, and I'm going to figure this thing out. It was introduced in the House on April the 30th, 2015. On May 12th, it passed, agreed to in the House on a motion to suspend the rules and to pass as amended, agreed to by the yeas and nays, 407 to 5.
That's the point that I wanted.
Roll call vote number 220.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. So that means if I was present, I voted for it. So my question to you is, now if I choose to vote against the American Trade Enforcement Act, or TPA, I would then be voting against a measure that had already passed the House unanimously. And I understand all of our prerogatives, but I just want to make sure that members understand that they will be voting against law enforcement officers, firefighters, and air traffic controllers making a penalty-free withdrawal if
Gentleman
they
yield.
vote for this matter. Yes, I yield to the.
I do understand exactly what the gentleman is saying, and in fairness to the gentleman, I will be handling the rule, and I would hope that no one would accuse you therein. You have voted for it. I'm not going to go through previous history about things which are said about voting for or against or whatever, but I think the gentleman makes a wise point, and I would be disappointed, and I will personally state this. We're more or less on the record here, even though I've got to be careful because, you know, never know when things are going to happen where I break the law, Louise. That you did vote for it, and it was placed upon an amendment that you strenuously had objected to, and that it came up here, and you did your duty, and it would be a shame that anybody would accuse you of not voting to support them.
Well,
And I will stand by that.
I'll be in the same position that
I would be
former
too.
Senator Kerry was. I
That's
voted
what I was in
for it
reference
before
to that I
voted
didn't want
against
to
it.
say.
But that said,
But your point's well made.
yeah,
I'll yield back my.
I understand,
my
Mr. Chairman.
inquiry.
And when this is open for amendment, or at least here on the rule, which obviously we will be voting on, I gather, tomorrow, I would like to offer an amendment to 2146 that's being voted on here today, whenever it's open for amendment.
Well, we're now
All
open
right.
for amendment.
And that
For the
said,
gentleman's recognized.
that said, a provision that was offered
Okay, that's it.
as number 2 by Mr. Visklosky. I have an amendment, and I ask that at the end of the bill, that the following Title II improvements to anti-dumping and countervailing laws be made in order as an amendment to this provision that is before us today. In my brief discussion regarding it, what struck me immediately about it was how much need exists for an anti-dumping provision. On the day before yesterday, or yesterday, when you and I were talking, Mr. Chairman, and I asked whether you thought that NAFTA benefited America, your response was that it benefited your state. I can attest, and I didn't say it at that time, that it did not benefit my state. And the very first thing that happened was the dumping by Mexico of tomatoes that virtually at that time eviscerated the tomato industry in the state of Florida. So it would seem to me that this isn't an unusual request, that we would add Mr. Visklowski's provision so that we don't have distortion of prices or costs by dumping. And I can assure you that's something that every member ought to be concerned about as we go forward. It also further indicates how secretive all of this has been. I keep hearing the business about going downstairs and reading this. This isn't the ultimate trade agreement. The ultimate trade agreement is only halfway done. And there are measures waiting upon our actions here by other countries who have decided that they are not going to go forward until the president has fast-track authority. So we're halfway there, and there are half measures that we don't know about, and yet we're in a trusting position that everything is going to be okay. Now, toward that end, whoever cut this deal, and I don't imagine, Mr. Chairman, that you were in the loop on that, but no offense meant to you, but whoever cut this deal, do they have the assurance that the White House is going to sign this measure, or is that an important concern as to whether the White House is going to sign this measure without the Trade Adjustment Authority, or TAA, being involved?
Now, I heard, if gentlemen will engage me evidently, I heard two questions. One, I heard the dumping provisions that you do not believe is properly addressed. I would believe that what would happen is that, notwithstanding whatever this authority, TPA, is about, that someone could use their own brain and figure out as they negotiate that we did not address every single issue that would be there, and they would be wise enough as officials who have knowledge about the tricks of the trade or the tricks that occur or the past where there had been things, that they would certainly negotiate that there too. We did not tell them exactly how to negotiate, but in about 160 areas we did.
Yeah.
Secondly, I heard the question, tell me more about the president signing this so it goes from the House, assuming it passes, to the Senate, assuming it passes, going to the president without a TAA. Now, that's what I heard you ask.
Yes, sir.
That was the second question.
Right.
The answer is, I don't know.
You don't know.
And I raised that question back where the members, before we walked in, we brought that up. So, as best I can tell you, you can consider whatever dialogue we had as probably you may or may not agree with.
Yes, sir.
We don't know, but would think that the White House and the United States Senate and Mrs. Pelosi would have a clear understanding about that process that they would like to follow. But it is, to me, is entirely possible. This could clear the House, this could clear the Senate, and then the president's got to do something. So
Understood.
I think they've measured 3 times and probably saw once.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Then, while I know that the local media here on the Hill are not authority, but in today's roll call, they do cite that the president's press secretary made a statement to the effect that the only legislative strategy, quoting Josh Earnest, that the president will support is a strategy that results in both TPA and TAA coming to his desk. And I gather that exists as a possibility under the method that we are using today, meaning that somewhere along the line, I guess the Senate is going to twist itself into a pretzel-like institution and pass TAA over the objection of a considerable number of senators. And then the question becomes for me whether or not the July 30th deadline is going to be met by passage of this measure tomorrow. Does that satisfy us for the July 30th deadline, Or is the July 30th deadline still in force and effect for us to be able to undertake additional measures, including TAA?
Thank you very much. The gentleman, if he is engaging me, I'd like to offer two responses. The first one is that I would like to also let the gentleman know that there is language in the Customs Bill dealing with anti-dumping issues. But that does not mean it satisfied your criteria. So I know the gentleman is entitled to his own opinion on that issue, but there is language in the Customs Bill. The second question that the gentleman is asking is, would we still reserve, in essence, the availability to come back on TAA? That answer is yes.
All right.
We are not doing anything in this action today that would take that. It is solely the exact language of TPA that was passed last Friday.
All right. Then I return to the request that I made on the amendment of the measure offered by Mr. Visklosky, that it be made a part of today's rule that we're running.
Thank you very much. There is now an amendment on the floor, and we are still open to discussion, and the chairman wants to ask if anyone has a further discussion on the amendment that's been placed of the Hastings Amendment. Seeing none, the vote will now be on the Hastings Amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no.
Mr. Chairman,
No
I
votes
ask
have.
for a roll call.
The gentleman asked for a roll call vote. Clerk will poll.
Ms. Fox? Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion.
I do have.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. About concerns the open process that we haven't got. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make the House TPA amendment subject to amendment under an open process as if being considered under an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer their ideas on the floor.
Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, gentleman's
I would
recognized.
just strongly urge my colleagues to support this, this amendment by the ranking member. I repeat, if you were a United States Senator, you get to offer amendments in this process. If you're a member of the United States House of Representatives, you've been locked out. This is the second time we're being locked out, and I think Democrats and Republicans ought to have the ability to try to improve this process and this agreement, and we ought to have an open amendment process. Yield back.
Yes, sir. Further discussion. The vote will now be on the Slaughter Amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it.
Roll call, please.
Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Further
Mr.
amendment or
Chairman?
discussion. Yes, sir.
I have a parliamentary inquiry, and it's in reference to the potential of me offering an oral amendment allowing for a motion to recommit. Or is it that this particular measure as offered disallows an amendment that would allow for the minority to have a motion to recommit?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, that's a very good question. Messages between the two bodies like this, okay, you know the answer. Do not allow that.
All right.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion? Those in favor of the amendment, the motion by the gentlewoman from North Carolina will vote aye. Those in favor, aye. Those opposed,
There's not a lot of
no.
enthusiasm. Yeah.
No.
The ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Roll call, please.
Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox? Aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter.
No,
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern.
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
The motion is agreed to, motion is agreed to. I will be handling this for Republicans,
and I shall handle it for the Democrats.
and the gentlewoman from New York will be handling for Democrats. I would like to, without objection, enter into the record the information that is contained therein about the amendment that came from the Senate and a note of the text of what I read earlier as to some of the parts of the bill. Anything further for the committee? Thank you very much.
The motion, it was just a motion to adopt the rule.